Okay, welcome to week 5 video announcement for Theology 2 Midwestern Seminary. Thanks so much for your hard work thus far in the course. Think you guys are doing a great job for the most part. By the time you read this or watch this, I should say, I'll be in the midst of grading your exams. Just one midterm exams. One housekeeping thing. Please remember, I've mentioned this several times. Follow the syllabus as it relates to deadlines. I know Canvas may say that it's late. Remember that your weekly quizzes and your final discussion board posts aren't due until Sunday night. That includes your midterm. Now your final will be a little bit different. It'll be due the Thursday of the final week of class, but we'll talk more about that when we get closer. But for all other elements of the course, Sunday by 11:59 p.m. is when they're due, except with the exception of your base post for discussion boards being due by Tuesday at 11:59 p.m. Okay, a couple quick things about some of the discussion board conversations we've been having. A couple weeks ago, we started the conversation about gifts, and I tried to give each of you feedback on your discussion board posts and some content thoughts for you to consider. Just remember that when you're into this discussion about gifts, and miraculous gifts especially, there's a couple of key issues you're needing to work through. One, clearly define these gifts biblically. So some of you that took a continuation position really had to work hard in your definition of prophecy. And so I would just encourage you to continue to work through that. If you take a different definition of prophecy from the Old to the New Testament, explain why you do. Connected to that is the question of new revelation. As a baseline kind of issue that you need to have worked through in this course is whether you think new revelation is possible after the closing of the canon of the 66 books of the Bible. And so depending on your definition of prophecy, I think you really got to clarify where you're coming from on that. That also gets into the gift of tongues, whether that's a medium through which God would provide new revelation that's equivalent in its authority and status as the Bible. They're on equal footing. You've got to clarify that. And then the final issue I would just say about miraculous gifts is if you are a continuationist, if you take that position, and many of you did, is that set of gifts, prophecy, tongues, and healing, those three especially, is that set of gifts normative for the worship of the church? So is it such that a church should look for these gifts to be manifesting themselves and showing up in the local worship of that church? For example, if in a 3-year period the gift of tongues, or the gift of prophecy or healing doesn't show up, is there a problem? We would all acknowledge that not all the miraculous gifts show up in every person, every believer's life. Not all the gifts show up in one person's life. But in the body of Christ, in a local body, we would say that all those gifts should be showing up, be representative if it's going to be a healthy body. So many of you that took a continuationist position, you need to clarify that, work through that, what that means not just for this course, but for in your pastoral ministry, the calling that you have. That's important. This coming week, we're going to be talking about effectual call, and the discussion board prompt is asking you to take a position as it relates to Erickson's position on effectual call. So I'm looking for a couple things here, okay, in this week's post. I want you to clearly define Erickson's position. Okay, before you launch off into what you think about effectual call or how you're going to critique Erickson, make sure you give a succinct 2 or 3 sentence at the least explanation of Erickson's position. Now keep in mind, Erickson's position is tied to some nuanced definitions of terms like gospel call, conversion, and regeneration. Okay, you need to have those clearly at work in your mind and express them through the post. Once you interact with Erickson's position, I want to discourage many of you from jumping right to theological formulations. Start with the Bible. Explain to me from the text why certain definitions are right or wrong, why a certain order is right or wrong. Don't start with a theological position about God's sovereignty or election. Start with the Bible. Now, I'm not saying you don't need to get there, but I think sometimes many of you, especially in this course, I've observed this in several of your posts, you're not really interacting with the text. You're just spouting out kind of theological formulations, none of which are unorthodox. I've not heard one of you make a heretical claim, but what I have seen is some laziness in your interaction with the Bible. I want you to shore that up this week and really work through this issue, not just from a theological perspective, but from a biblical and exegetical perspective that should lead to that theological engagement. So I'm thankful for your hard work. These are really important issues, all of which are incredibly relevant for your local ministry and your calling that God's placed on your life. If I can help you, or if you have questions, don't hesitate to ask. Thanks.